Maxwell sat on the balcony of his luxurious penthouse in East Legon, the city lights of Accra twinkling in the distance. The warm evening breeze brushed against his face, but his heart felt heavy. His success had come at a cost. While he had built a thriving business empire and amassed wealth beyond his wildest dreams, his heart carried scars from the past, scars left by women who had seen him as nothing more than a stepping stone to a life of comfort. The memories of past relationships haunted him. Clara, the woman he once thought was the one, had disappeared the moment his business faced a minor setback years ago. And then there was Eva, who used his credit card like it was a magic wand, only to vanish when he questioned her intentions. These experiences had hardened him, making it difficult to trust again. But Amanda was different. At least that's what he wanted to believe. He remembered the day he met her at a mutual friend's birthday party. She wasn't like the other women there, who clung to his arm or asked him endless questions about his wealth. Amanda had laughed easily, her bright smile lighting up her face as she shared stories about growing up in Kumasi and her struggles to make a life in Accra. She didn't seem overly impressed by his car or the watch on his wrist. For the first time in years, Maxwell felt like someone was seeing him, not his money. Amanda, he whispered her name aloud, a soft smile tugging at his lips. She was kind, beautiful, and full of life. They had been dating for almost a year now, and he had started to picture a future with her, a home, children, and a life of shared dreams. Yet that nagging voice in his head refused to be silent. One evening, as he picked Amanda up from her mother's modest home in Medina, he overheard a conversation that unsettled him. Amanda was speaking with her best friend, Doris, on the porch. "Amanda, you've struck gold with Maxwell. You don't have to worry about anything again. Just play your cards right," Doris said with a laugh. Amanda's response was muffled, but Maxwell caught snippets. "It's not like that. But yes, he does take care of me." The words echoed in his mind as they drove to dinner that night. Amanda had been warm and attentive, asking about his day and sharing stories about hers. Still, her words from earlier clung to him like a shadow, feeding his insecurities. Was she with him for love or for the life he could provide? Maxwell hated the doubt creeping into his thoughts, but it was there, persistent and unwelcome. One night he shared his concerns with his best friend, Kwame, as they sat in his office overlooking the bustling streets of Accra. "Kwame, what if she's like the others?" Maxwell asked, his voice low and filled with uncertainty. Kwame leaned back in his chair, studying him. "Max, you've been hurt before, but not everyone is the same. Amanda might be genuine. But what if she's not? I can't go through that again." Kwame sighed. "Then you need to find out. Test her, if that's what it takes for you to believe in her." Maxwell nodded slowly. It was a risk, but it was the only way he could be sure. If Amanda loved him for who he was, not what he had, she would stay. If not, it was better to know now than later. The plan began to form in his mind, a test of love that would either bring them closer or tear them apart. One evening, Amanda and Maxwell were sitting in his house when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowning slightly. It was his lawyer. "Let me take this," Maxwell said, picking up the phone. "Hello, Joe?" Amanda barely noticed, continuing to scroll through her Instagram feed. Maxwell's calm demeanor changed as he listened to the voice on the other end. His brows knitted together, and he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Wait, what do you mean it's all gone?" Maxwell's voice rose slightly, catching Amanda's attention. She looked up from her phone, her brows furrowed. "What's wrong?" she whispered, her voice curious but cautious. Maxwell held up a finger, signaling her to wait. "Are you saying the investment completely tanked? How is that even possible? This was supposed to be secure." He paused, rubbing his temple as he listened to the response on the other end. His face paled. "So I've lost everything? All my shares?" he asked, his voice quieter now. There was a long silence as he listened to his lawyer's explanation. Finally, he sighed deeply. "All right. Thanks, Joe. Keep me updated." Maxwell ended the call and sat back, his shoulders slumped. He placed the phone on the table and stared at it for a moment, as though willing it to undo the news he'd just received. "Maxwell, what's going on?" Amanda asked, her tone more impatient than concerned. She set her phone down and leaned forward slightly. He let out a heavy breath before turning to her. "I've lost everything, Amanda. The investment I made, it went bad. I've lost my shares in the company, my savings, everything." Amanda's eyes widened. "Everything? Like, all your money?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. She sat back, her expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. Maxwell nodded, his eyes searching hers for any sign of reassurance. "Yes, I don't have much left." Amanda was silent for a moment, processing his words. "But how? Weren't you careful? How could something like this happen?" "It was a risk I thought would pay off," Maxwell explained, his voice steady but weary. "It didn't." Amanda forced a small, shaky smile. "Well, we'll figure it out, right? I mean, things can't be that bad." Maxwell looked at her, the flicker of hope in his eyes dimming slightly. "Amanda, this means I won't be able to provide the same life I've given you. Things are going to change." Amanda's smile faltered. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but closed it again. Finally, she reached for her phone. I just need to think," she said, avoiding his gaze. Maxwell felt the first pang of doubt as he watched her. She didn't offer any comforting words, didn't reach out to hold his hand or say it would be okay. Instead, she picked up her phone, scrolling again, her lips pressed into a thin line. The following week, Maxwell took the test a step further. He told Amanda he could no longer afford his luxurious home and would have to move into a small flat. When Maxwell first moved into the small flat, Amanda made an effort to show her support. The move had been a stark change from his luxurious home in East Legon, and Maxwell was still adjusting to the lack of space. Amanda, determined to keep things normal, tried to brighten the atmosphere during her early visits. During one of her visits, she arrived carrying 2 large bags of groceries. "I thought you might need some supplies," she said with a smile, stepping into the flat. She set the bags on the small kitchen counter and began unpacking them. "I brought rice, tomatoes, onions, and a few spices. Oh, and there's some canned fish, too." As Maxwell watched her move around the tiny kitchen, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Amanda truly was different. Maybe she would stand by him through the hard times. But as the weeks passed, Maxwell began to notice subtle changes. Amanda's initial enthusiasm waned. Her visits became less frequent and shorter. When she did come over, she seemed in a rush to leave, checking her phone constantly or making excuses about needing to get back home. One Sunday afternoon, Maxwell had planned a simple meal for the 2 of them. When Amanda arrived, she barely glanced at the table. "This looks nice," she said, setting her bag on the floor. "But I can't stay long. Doris and I are going shopping in town." Maxwell's shoulders slumped as he nodded slowly. "All right," he said quietly. "At least have a plate before you go." Amanda sighed, sitting down reluctantly. She picked at the food, her phone buzzing with notifications. She glanced at the screen every few minutes, replying to messages with quick taps. "Who's texting you so much?" Maxwell asked, trying to keep his tone light. "Oh, just Doris," Amanda said quickly, putting her phone face down on the table. "She's asking what time I'll be ready." Maxwell gave a small, tight smile, but his heart felt heavy. The Amanda sitting in front of him felt like a stranger, someone who was present physically but miles away emotionally. That afternoon, Amanda met up with her friends, Doris and Ivy, at a cafe in Osu. They wasted no time addressing Maxwell's situation. So, Amanda, Doris began, sipping her iced latte, are you really sticking with Maxwell now that he's broke? Amanda laughed nervously. What do you mean? Of course I'm sticking with him. Why? Ivy interjected, her tone sharp. What can he offer you now? Look at you. You deserve so much better. Doris leaned closer, her voice low but pointed. We know someone who could actually take care of you. Someone who's still in the league Maxwell used to play in. Amanda hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Her heart felt torn. She still cared about Maxwell, but her friend's words planted a seed of doubt. Could she really stay with a man who couldn't provide the life she wanted? Meanwhile, Maxwell continued with the test. One day he told Amanda that he had taken a job as a security guard to make ends meet. He wore the uniform, complete with a badge and cap, and showed her a picture of himself at the job. I'm doing what I can, he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. It's not much, but it's honest work. Amanda looked at the picture, her expression hard to read. But the following day, when she told Doris and Ivy about Maxwell's new job, they were relentless. A security guard? Doris exclaimed, laughing loudly. Amanda, this is what you're dealing with now. Why are you even still with him? Ivy smirked. You need to meet Daniel. He's everything Maxwell isn't anymore. Successful, confident, and rich. Amanda's laughter was half-hearted, but she didn't disagree. That evening, she found herself thinking about what her friends had said. One evening, Maxwell sat in his flat, staring at his phone. Amanda hadn't responded to his messages all day. When he called, it went straight to voicemail. He had a sinking feeling in his stomach, but he didn't know what to do. The next day, Maxwell decided to visit Amanda's house unannounced. As he approached the gate, he saw Amanda stepping out, dressed in a sleek black dress. She was on the phone, smiling and laughing as she walked briskly down the street. Maxwell's chest tightened, and he decided to follow her. Amanda hailed a taxi, and Maxwell tailed it carefully, staying a few cars behind. The journey ended at a high-end restaurant in Osu. Maxwell parked discreetly and watched as Amanda stepped out of the taxi and walked inside, her heels clicking confidently on the pavement. Minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up, and a man stepped out, Daniel. Maxwell recognized him immediately. He had heard about Daniel, a wealthy businessman who moved in the same circles as he once had. Amanda greeted Daniel with a wide smile, and they walked into the restaurant together, laughing as if they didn't have a care in the world. Maxwell's heart sank as he watched them through the large glass windows. Amanda leaned in, laughing at something Daniel said, her hand lightly touching his arm. It was the kind of intimacy she no longer shared with Maxwell. He stayed there for a while, frozen in place. The following day, Maxwell drove to Amanda's house, his heart pounding with a mix of sadness and anger. He couldn't let this go without confronting her. When Amanda opened the door, she looked surprised to see him. "Maxwell," she said, stepping outside quickly, glancing nervously behind her. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," Maxwell said, his voice calm but firm. "Can we sit down?" Amanda sighed, folding her arms. "If it's about us, I really don't have the time." Maxwell took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Amanda, I followed you yesterday. I saw you with Daniel." Her eyes widened for a moment before narrowing. "You followed me," she said, her tone defensive. "That's creepy, Maxwell. Why would you do that?" "Because you've been distant," Maxwell replied, his voice breaking slightly. "You've been avoiding me, lying to me, and now I know why." Amanda rolled her eyes and crossed her arms tighter. "Okay, fine. You want the truth?" "Yes, I've been seeing Daniel. And you know why? Because you can't give me what I need, Maxwell. Look at your life. You're broke. I can't live like this." Maxwell felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. "Amanda, I thought you loved me. Wasn't that enough?" Amanda scoffed, shaking her head. Love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't buy nice clothes or take me to nice places. Daniel can give me those things, and you can't. I'm sorry, Maxwell, but I have to think about my future. Maxwell's heart shattered at her words, but before he could respond, Amanda's mother appeared at the doorway, her face set in a scowl. What's going on here? Her mother demanded, looking from Amanda to Maxwell. Why is he here? I'm just trying to talk to Amanda, Maxwell said quietly, his voice heavy with emotion. Amanda's mother snorted, stepping outside and pointing a finger at him. Talk to her? About what? Maxwell, you've got nothing to offer my daughter. Nothing. She's not going to suffer with you while you figure your life out. Ma, please, Amanda said half-heartedly, but she didn't step in to defend Maxwell. No, Amanda, her mother snapped. He needs to hear this. Maxwell, you're broke. You're finished. Stop coming here and embarrassing yourself. My daughter deserves a man who can take care of her. Maxwell looked at Amanda, hoping she might say something, anything, to contradict her mother. But Amanda just looked away, her lips pressed into a tight line. Don't come back here, her mother continued, her voice loud and cutting. Go and focus on your own problems. Leave Amanda alone. Maxwell stood there for a moment, stunned. The woman he had once dreamed of marrying stood silently as her mother tore into him, not even lifting a finger to defend him. Finally he nodded, his shoulders slumping. All right, Maxwell said softly. He turned and walked back to his car, his heart heavy with betrayal. As he drove away, the sound of Amanda's mother's harsh words echoed in his mind. But it was Amanda's silence that hurt the most. Despite everything, Maxwell still couldn't let go. He loved Amanda dearly. He convinced himself that Amanda might change her mind if she truly understood the depth of his love. That night, he decided to take one final leap of faith. He reached into the drawer by his bed and pulled out the engagement ring he had bought, a simple but meaningful symbol of his commitment. It wasn't extravagant, but it came from his heart. This has to work, Maxwell muttered to himself as he slipped the ring into his pocket. The next afternoon, Maxwell arrived at Amanda's house. The scorching sun beat down on him as he walked up to the small gate and knocked. A moment later, Amanda opened the door, her expression shifting from surprise to annoyance. Maxwell, what are you doing here? She asked, stepping outside and closing the door behind her. I need to talk to you, Maxwell said, his voice calm but resolute. Amanda sighed, crossing her arms. This isn't a good time. I'm busy. It won't take long, Maxwell replied. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring. Taking a deep breath, he got down on one knee, looking up at her with pleading eyes. Amanda, he began, his voice trembling. I know things aren't the way they used to be, but my love for you hasn't changed. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? For a moment, Amanda just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then she laughed, a bitter, mocking sound that cut through Maxwell like a knife. Are you serious? She said, her voice dripping with disdain. She reached down and snatched the ring from his hand, holding it up for closer inspection. This? This is what you're offering me? Maxwell, this ring is as cheap as your life right now. Maxwell's face fell, but he remained on his knee, refusing to give up. Amanda, it's not about the ring. It's about us. I love you, and I want to build a life with you, together. Amanda scoffed, tossing the ring onto the ground as if it were trash. It landed in the dirt, glinting faintly in the sunlight. Maxwell, you don't get it, do you? I don't want to build anything. I want a man who already has it all figured out, a man who can give me what I deserve. And that's not you. At that moment, Amanda's mother stepped out of the house, her face set in a scowl. She took one look at Maxwell kneeling on the ground and shook her head. You're still here, her mother said sharply, her tone filled with disdain. "Maxwell, haven't you embarrassed yourself enough?" "I just wanted to ask Amanda," Maxwell began, but her mother cut him off. "Ask her what? To marry you? With what? Love?" Her voice was loud and scornful. "Love doesn't pay bills, Maxwell. My daughter deserves better than a broke man. You need to leave and never come back." Before Maxwell could respond, Amanda's mother disappeared into the house, only to return a moment later with a bucket of water. Without a word, she threw the water over him, soaking him from head to toe. "Go!" she shouted, "and don't come back!" Amanda stood by, her arms crossed, not lifting a finger to stop her mother or to defend Maxwell. As Maxwell stood up, dripping wet, he looked at Amanda one last time. "I thought you loved me," he said quietly, his voice heavy with pain. Amanda shrugged, her face cold. "I thought I did too, but I need more than what you can give me." Just as Maxwell was about to leave, the sound of an engine roared down the street. A sleek black car pulled up to the house and Daniel stepped out. Amanda's face lit up, a stark contrast to the indifference she had shown Maxwell. "Hey, babe," Daniel said, flashing a charming smile. "You ready?" Amanda grabbed her bag and walked past Maxwell without a word, climbing into Daniel's car. Before driving off, Daniel glanced at Maxwell with a smug grin, as if to say, "You've lost." Maxwell stood there, watching the car disappear down the road. His chest felt tight, his heart heavy. He turned and walked away, the water still dripping from his clothes, but the pain in his heart far outweighing his discomfort. The days that followed were some of the hardest Maxwell had ever endured. He replayed the scene at Amanda's house over and over in his mind, haunted by her words and the image of her throwing the ring away. He couldn't understand how someone he loved so deeply could humiliate him so cruelly. The rejection cut deeper than he had ever thought possible. One evening Maxwell sat in his flat, staring at the engagement ring he had retrieved from the dirt outside Amanda's house. He turned it over in his hands, the simple band glinting faintly under the dim light. "Was it all for nothing?" he murmured to himself. The silence of the room offered no answers. His best friend, Kwame, stopped by to check on him. Maxwell opened the door, and Kwame took one look at his face and shook his head. "You're still thinking about her, aren't you?" he asked. Maxwell nodded, letting Kwame inside. "I just don't understand, Kwame. I loved her. I was ready to give her everything, even when I had nothing. Why couldn't she see that?" Kwame sighed, sitting on the couch. "Some people don't see the value of love until it's gone, Max. Amanda made her choice. You can't keep punishing yourself for her mistakes." Maxwell nodded but didn't respond. Deep down he knew Kwame was right, but moving on felt impossible. Amanda's life with Daniel seemed like a dream at first. Lavish gifts, expensive dinners, and luxury outings filled her days. Daniel rented her a high-end flat in Cantonments, and her social media was filled with pictures of her glamorous lifestyle. She was convinced she had made the right choice, leaving behind Maxwell and his struggles. One evening, as Amanda waited for Daniel to arrive at her flat, a knock came at the door. Expecting him, she opened it with a bright smile, only to find a well-dressed woman standing there, her expression icy. "Can I help you?" Amanda asked, confused. The woman crossed her arms, her tone sharp. "I'm Daniel's wife." Amanda's breath caught in her throat. "Excuse me?" she managed, her voice shaky. "You heard me," the woman said, stepping closer. "Daniel is married. To me. We have 3 kids, and while I've been at home raising them, he's been spending money on you." Amanda stumbled back, clutching the doorframe for support. I didn't know," she stammered. "He never told me." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Of course he didn't. But now you know. I'm taking my husband back where he belongs." Without waiting for a response, the woman turned and walked away. leaving Amanda standing there in shock. When Daniel arrived later that night, Amanda confronted him. "You lied to me," she shouted, her voice trembling with anger. "You're married." Daniel didn't deny it. He simply shrugged, his face calm and indifferent. "Amanda, you knew what this was. I never promised you anything serious. But you made me think—" Amanda's voice broke as tears streamed down her face. "You thought wrong," Daniel said, his tone cold. "I'm going back to my family. This was fun while it lasted, but it's over." And just like that, he left. Amanda was alone, her perfect life crumbling around her. Amanda couldn't afford the rent on the luxurious flat. Within weeks, she was forced to move back to her mother's house. She went from man to man, desperately seeking for one to provide her with the lavish lifestyle that she dreamed of, only to fail. To make ends meet, Amanda took a job as a waitress at a small restaurant. The work was hard, the pay was low, and the customers were often rude. Each day she carried the weight of her regrets, replaying her choices in her mind. She thought of Maxwell, his kindness, his love, and the life they could have built together. She had thrown it all away for the illusion of wealth. It was a quiet afternoon at the restaurant where Amanda worked as a waitress. The lunchtime rush had passed, and Amanda was wiping down tables, her thoughts lost in the monotony of her day. She barely noticed when the door swung open and a familiar figure walked in. Her heart skipped a beat. It was Maxwell. He looked striking, dressed in a tailored suit that exuded confidence and success. He seemed completely at ease as he approached a table near the window and sat down, glancing briefly at the menu. Amanda stood frozen, her mind racing. The last time she had seen him, she had humiliated him in front of her mother. She had thrown away his ring, mocked his struggles, and chosen a life of luxury over his love. Yet here he was, looking as successful as ever. Gathering her courage, Amanda walked over to his table, her tray clutched tightly in her hands. "Maxwell," she said softly, her voice trembling. Maxwell looked up, his face calm but unreadable. "Amanda," he said simply, giving her a polite nod. She hesitated, unsure of what to say, but the words tumbled out before she could stop them. I'm surprised to see you here. You look, well." Maxwell smiled faintly. "I am," he said, his tone steady. "How have you been?" Amanda felt a lump rise in her throat. "Not great," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Things haven't been easy." Maxwell nodded but didn't respond, his silence prompting her to continue. "Maxwell, I need to tell you something," she said, her words coming quickly now. "I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't see what I had back then. I've changed, and I wish I could go back and do things differently." Maxwell studied her for a moment, then leaned back in his chair. "Amanda," he said, his tone calm but firm, "there's something you should know." She looked at him, her heart pounding. "What is it?" Maxwell exhaled deeply, his gaze steady. "Back then, when I told you I had lost everything, it wasn't true. It was a test. I needed to know if you loved me for who I was, not what I had." Amanda's eyes widened, her breath catching. A test?" she stammered. "You mean you didn't actually lose everything?" Maxwell shook his head. "No, I didn't. I wanted to see if you would stand by me when things got tough, and you didn't." Tears welled in Amanda's eyes. "Maxwell, I was wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "I see that now. I made a mistake. I've changed, I promise. Can't we try again?" Before Maxwell could respond, a woman approached the table. She was elegant and composed, her warm smile lighting up the room as she placed a hand on Maxwell's shoulder. "Sorry I'm late," the woman said, glancing at Amanda briefly before turning to Maxwell. Maxwell stood up, pulling out a chair for the woman. He turned to Amanda, his expression soft but firm. "Amanda, this is Lydia," he said. "My wife." Amanda's heart sank as she looked at Lydia, who smiled kindly at her. "It's nice to meet you," Lydia said, her tone genuine. Amanda felt a wave of regret wash over her, stronger than anything she had felt before. She forced a weak smile, nodding. "Nice to meet you too," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. Maxwell turned back to Amanda, his expression unreadable. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Amanda," he said, his tone polite, but final. Amanda stood there as Maxwell and Lydia sat down, their conversation resuming as though she wasn't even there. She walked away slowly, her mind swirling with regret and self-reproach. She realized then that Maxwell had moved on, building a life with someone who loved him for who he was, not for what he had. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more great content. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let me know what you think. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might enjoy it too. See you in the next one.